Yo, what's going on, everyone? It's Brian and Jim here with DrinkABeerandPlayAGame, and today we are going to be checking out Furi.
Yes, this comes to us as a Patreon request review from our buddy Zwick, the editor. Edited it to the stars. Thank you for picking such a hard game, but also an interesting one, so let's get into it.
You son of a bitch.
Yep.
You know what you did to us.
Yep.
It's Jim's fault.
Originally released to the PlayStation 4 and Windows in July of 2016, this was developed and published by the Game Breakers. It eventually got published to the Xbox One, the Nintendo Switch, and the PlayStation 5. Oh, also the Amazon Luna. So, hey, something's on there. So this is a weird one. It combines like one-on-one hack and slash boss fights with bullet hell and twin stick shooting. So the story of the game is you're basically this guy named the Unknown. He's kept in this galactic jail. He gets released and he has to fight his way to freedom. And along the way, he learns the reasons why he was put there, who released him, all that kind of good stuff. It's kind of cool. And this is a notoriously hard game. So, is it as hard as people say? Well, yes, but we're going to get into why.
The graphics. Jim and I have discussed this on the podcast a few times. I don't know what it is about cel-shaded games. They never really grab me. I know one of the appeals is that they kind of make the game a little more timeless and less dated. However, I don't know, it just seems a little off to me. But putting aside my personal bias, this is a pretty-ass game to look at. There are a lot of vibrant colors going on, and you're going to go through 9 bosses, potentially 10 when you get to the good ending. Jim will touch on that a little bit later. And for the most part, I'd say at least half of these have really unique settings. Some of them feel a little reused, but the colors, as I said, you get those really bright neon purples, the greens, blues, reds. I mean, it really covers the whole spectrum. And the actual details in the animations when you're fighting these bosses can be really well done, especially if you do a perfect parry and you get this little animation. But as Jim already mentioned, some of the game is like a bullet hell. So if you're someone who enjoys seeing stuff like this, then it's just eye candy for you. As I said, me personally, I didn't think it was anything that stunning, and I know people may disagree with me.
Bri,
Yes.
you forgot to mention that the art was designed by Takahashi Okazaki, who's known for Afro Samurai. So you can kind of see where that inspiration comes from.
Why would I care about that, though?
Bri, be a weeb.
I'll never. So yeah, that guy did it.
Yeah.
But if you're someone who loves the style, obviously you're going to grade a lot higher. Jim and I, we definitely think it's above average, but it's nowhere near perfect, so we both gave it 7s. When it comes to beers, I'm just going to add 1 because, while I may not personally like the cel-shaded, this is one for all you that love the shit out of it.
The sound. All right, the first big thing to talk about in this game is the music, because it's excellent. It combines like synthwave with techno, with, just general electronic music, but it's very moody and very well done. It's almost weird because you almost kind of stop listening. You're so engrossed in the boss fights that during the actual fights, the music is good, but you're just not paying attention to it at all. You are listening to every sound cue for the actual combat that you can get, so you almost blank it out. But you really get to sit back and enjoy it during the walking sections between the boss fights when there's all the exposition going on, and it just really adds to the overall mood of the game. And speaking of those walking sections, that's where most of the dialogue in the game comes from. And the voice acting in the game is done pretty well. I don't have a complaint with any of the performances. I think they're all pretty well done. I wouldn't say anything's stand out for the most part, but what you get here fits the game perfectly. Yeah, the sound effects. For the most part, it's going to be the sounds of your bullets, going to hear the sound of swords clashing together a lot from all the parrying you're going to be doing. And yeah, it's kind of typical combat sounds, and once again, it kind of melds into the background during the heat of battle, but it definitely gets the job done. And like I said, there are those little sound cues that you get during the course of a fight. Like, you're going to hear for that little ting right before a sword slash from a bad guy. So you got to make sure that you're on your game there. But With all that being said, it's a very solid package, and we both gave it 8s. And when it comes to beer, I'm just going to add one more beer for just how atmospheric everything is. It's perfect now.
The control. Well, this is an area that's actually kind of controversial because this is one of the few games where I decided, as I'm playing it, let me see what other people's opinions are. And this is a very much love it or hate it game. And one of the main reasons seems to be the control. And it's for one very good reason. You have to have lightning fast reflexes to beat some of these bosses. But you have to compensate for a block and a dodge that is delayed. And I know if you're a veteran of the game, then you're going to tell me that the dodge is really not delayed. It's just you hold it in to determine how far you go, and you actually dodge on the release. I know that, but that is a terrible mechanic to have. I would have rather just an immediate response dodge, and you could double dash somewhere other than holding it in, because the amount of stupid ass deaths.
Brian's not a Mario Kart.
Learn from that will make me better.
Ow!
The amount of stupid ass deaths you'll get will be really annoying because you will have just missed your dodge by a microsecond. And really, the only thing I can compliment the control on the most is that it is very simplistic. So in the majority of the boss fights, you're going to go through two major phases. The first being kind of an open distance where you're using your twin sticks to move and to shoot. I already mentioned the dodge and the parry mechanic. And then when you get up close, you're strictly going to be using your slash, which is X, or depending on what you're using. But that's really it. Now, there is some advanced things you can do, like when you're from distance, you can do a charge shot using RT or some of your trigger buttons. And when you're in close, you can once again use that same button to charge up a melee attack. Me personally, I never was good enough to use it, so it's almost like I never used it at all. But outside of that, the thing that kills me is this game is tough enough. I don't need to have any delay or any bullshit in my control to make it any tougher. And when you get to some of these later bosses like the Edge, you need that parry mechanic so frequently that I hate there's kind of a cooldown between it, which just kind of fucks it all up. So with all that being said, we both gave it 7s. I honestly was going to give it lower, but you get used to the delays and you build it into playing a game. But that sucks that it's there altogether. So anyone who claims this control is perfect, I don't know what you're smoking. So when it comes to beer, I'm at 3. For all you out there who I don't know what you're on, but get on some beer.
And actually, one weird side note, I found that my performance also depended on the controller. Like, this is the first time I'll ever say I probably preferred my Joy-Cons to, like, my 8-bit DOS NES controller or my Pro controller. Maybe just because they're so smaller and, like, maybe less responsive in a way. It actually helped me out. It's very weird, the gameplay. All right, we've already said this before, but we will say this again. This is a love it or hate it game. So, the main concept, once again, retreading water, it is one-on-one boss fights. That's all it is. For most of the levels, you start off in a somewhat biggish arena. You're running around trying to dodge attacks from your enemy and basically timing your attacks back. Meanwhile, you can be doing your gun to shoot with the twin stick aspect. And after a while, you get into a forced close combat section to kill off one of their life bars. So you, as the stranger, you have 3 health no matter what, but you have opportunities that you can gain a health by defeating one of their life bars. And there's also sections where you can get little bits of life back by perfect parries and stuff like that. And even though they don't give you that much health back, sometimes it's just that barely one little scrape of a bit enough to get you through. And really, that's kind of it. You just do it again and again and again. Now, some bosses have really long health bars, but it can be a little bit easier. Some have short health bars, and they are just a bitch to fight. Some are way more twin stick shooting focused, where some have no twin stick sections at all, and it's nothing but parrying and close combat. So it is cool how they switch that up, but if you don't like it the first time, you're not really going to like it by the end. This is a hard bastard of a game. And it's a game you almost have to be in the mood for. And I can like hard games, but like I think Cuphead's a way superior game in terms of game design, and I rage quit that. But I actually, for whatever reason, felt the want to come back to this game. Like, defeating a boss just feels like taking a giant dump. It's just such a release of just, like, satisfaction when you do it, that for me, I was kind of like, oh, I can't stop thinking about this boss fight. I want to try the next one. And then I get my ass kicked a couple times and go, all right, I'll come back later. Where for Brian, it almost felt like more of a chore for him. Not because we had to do this review, but just because he was the type of player who never had excitement for what was coming up next. Just because it was just going to be more frustration and more of the same. So it really just comes down to really your mood. Like, you kind of have to be in the mood for a game like this. Now, you can be one of those masochists who only like hard games, and this is right up your alley. But, you know, for people who kind of rage quit it, I also don't blame you. And, yeah, like I said before, you go through 8 or 9 bosses, and you get a couple endings. So you have a good ending, where you fight an extra final last boss, which is a pure bullet hell section. There's no close combat. Or you can do the bad ending, where you don't have to deal with it, but you kind of feel like a dick after. And there's also a super sneaky secret ending. And I won't spoil where it is for you if you've never done it, but I'll give you some advice. Just pay attention to those cutscenes during the walking sections. They can be a break, but if you're going to do that, I would suggest pausing the game. Just a little friendly advice for you. Because guess what? If you do the secret ending, you lose where you're at, and you go all the way back to the beginning. So good luck with that. And yeah, they actually eventually added DLC. One was called The One Last Fight, which, lucky Brian, on the Xbox, that's actually a forced section. Whereas it adds more cutscenes and stuff like that, but it's one last super hard boss fight before the final decisions. So he got screwed over that way. Whereas for me on the Switch, I was able to go to the normal endings and then just treat him as a DLC boss that I could fight whenever I wanted. And then there's also the Onimusha mode, which is cool because it turns your character into having 2 main fighting styles that you have to switch between during the fights. So one is super quick and good at dodging, but barely does any damage. And the other one will hit like a tank, but the dodging is extremely limited. So you have to, on top of an already hard game, you basically have to relearn the game and adapt to switching between the 2 game styles on the fly. So it's cool. I dicked around with it a little bit, but by the time I went to that part to really try it out, I was burnt out. So I know what it is. It's cool, but I'm not going to go back to that anytime soon. So with all that being said, Brian gave it a 6, and I gave it an 8. I obviously liked it way more than Brian did, but I can definitely see the complaints that anyone would have with this title. And when it comes to beer, I'm going to give it 3 beers. 1, for being ridiculously hard. 2, for giving the Xbox owners an even harder time. And 3, really for doing one thing and maybe doing it well, depending on who you are. It just does one thing.
The originality. So this is another area, just like gameplay, Jim and I differ. But here's the thing. Jim actually just pointed out something that's really well done in this game, is that you really do have to be in a mood. And there's very few games, and as Jim said, like Cuphead, I love the shit out of it. It was very difficult, but I found much more enjoyment. When going through this game, my problem with it was also some of the fights, the patterns become so predictable that it almost ends up feeling like a quick time event, especially when you're parrying. But then you get the bullet hell sections, which are at least a little more varied, but at the end of the day, each boss maybe only has 3 or 4 patterns. Now, I've never seen a game personally that has done this. However, we have seen bullet hell before. We have seen hack and slash with parrying before. So it took a lot of good ideas, added them together. You add in that art style and music, and that's the part that's unique about this game. But if you break it down, everything else is kind of, we've seen it before, we've done it before. And there's almost a sense of, like Jim said, after you beat the first boss, you kind of know what you're in for the next 9 things. Now, one thing Jim didn't touch on that is, I guess, interesting, but I can't even call it original, is the story itself. I'm not going to say it's like an M. Night Shyamalan movie with a twist ending, but there is an ending that you go, oh, okay, I wasn't expecting that, because you don't really know what's going on. And yeah, just do what Jim said. Listen to those cutscenes. So if you're looking for a semi-interesting story with a lot of gameplay mechanics that are put together in a way that, once again, I don't think I've ever seen a game do it like this, then this is one for you. But when it comes to scores, I gave it a 4, Jim gave it a 7. As I said, Jim obviously has a lot more love for this game, And with me, I kind of feel like I've seen all the individual elements before, so I couldn't give it that many points. So when it comes to beer, I'm going to add 2, 1 for me and 1 for Jim. We just have different opinions about this game.
Replayability. Depending on who you are, it's actually kind of limited. So besides the fact that it's super hard and you're just going to have to keep, if you want to beat it, you're going to keep coming back to it and retrying these fights again and again and again and again and again. But there's no multiplayer component to it. When you beat the game, you unlock the Furier mode, which is the harder mode. There's the One Last Fight DLC that we talked about with that extra boss. And then there's the Onimusha mode, which you can do on normal and Furier modes and unlock that there. And apparently, I am never going to put the effort into this, but if you beat all of the game modes, all on the hardest difficulty, and the One Last Fight DLC boss, then there's like an extra boss that's like an amalgamation of like every boss pattern and stuff like that. So if you do that, good luck. Outside of that, score chasing. So you can put your scores up online and try to be the best in the world at this and set your own personal records. Apparently it has a pretty dedicated speedrunning community, so that's cool, but again, that's not for me. So Brian gave it a 5 and I gave it a 4. So while there's technically some options to keep you coming back and also the 3 endings, it's not like there's a ton of pure reason to come back to it. And when it comes to beer, I'll just give it 2 beers. One for the 2 difficulty modes and another one for just, hey, you know what? If you're a speedrunner and you are a masochist, this is a game for you.
So overall, yeah, Jim and I could tell while we were playing this one, we had differing opinions. He actually seemed to do better at this game than I did, and
first time ever.
It's just like I don't know what the disconnect for me was. I like and I can see where people would love this game, but then, as Jim alluded to, I love reading online. Almost everyone by the second or third boss was like, "Fuck this game! Like, this is ridiculous. It's too hard." And it's one of those, once you learn the pattern, all of a sudden, you can get through sections before that you never could. And if you're willing to dump time into it, you might find enjoyment. Even when I got to the point when I was kind of blasting through levels and I was like, oh, okay, this isn't bad, it never grabbed me as a super fun one.
This is one I actually wish that I played on like Xbox or PlayStation so I could see the achievement and see like what percentage of people actually finish it who start it. Because I'm sure it's not that high. This was a really unique game for me. I haven't, there's been boss rush games for, as long as, gaming's been around. But, I don't know, this one just kind of hit different, and like Brian said during the review, it just mashed a lot of things together. And for whatever reason, I was in the mood for it, I was all about it, and I actually really enjoyed it. And I'm not a story in games kind of guy, but I really did like what they did with the story here. And yeah, it might not even be until like another playthrough that you understand what's going on, because during the cutscenes it sounds like gibberish.
Yeah.
But once you kind of understand what's going on, you go, oh, it's one of those deals. So it's a simple story, but it's told well. And on top of the bitch of a game that it is.
This is one personally I could never see myself being like, oh, I want to go back and try it again. I don't even think you would necessarily do that.
No, I think I'm good.
Yeah, so it's one that, like Jim said, if you really want to kind of torture yourself, or maybe you're someone that this is your type of game, it's unique. I'll give it that. So when it comes to scores, I gave it a 7. Jim gave it an 8. So we were close enough there, and when we combined all of our scores, comes out to a 7, which I think is the most fair you're going to give this game. If you're someone who gave up right away, obviously you'll never see benefit in it. If you're someone who thinks this is a perfect 10, my guess is you're a speedrunning god and you're like a score chaser who does really well at this game.
Good for you.
That's my only guess. But Zwick, I like the suggestions. Once again, we apologize we couldn't do the other one. You got some unique taste, I'll say that. But we do appreciate the support. And thank you to everyone who has been watching. Once again, if you want to torture yourself, make sure you drink a few beers and get in that flow state. Until next time, guys. Cheers.
Cheers, everyone.
When it comes to beer pairing, I'm going to have to go with the Laser Samurai from the Chipho Brewing Company. This is a spiced beer brewed with rice and lemongrass that comes in at 5.9%. Obviously, the label is a selling point to mix very well with a game like this. What I like is that this is only 5.9% and that you can still maintain all your sharpness while enjoying a really good beer. But remember to drink your beers and play your games responsibly.